A 32-story rocket was launched into orbit on the 16th of November 2022 from a launch pad at NASA's Kennedy Space Center during the peaceful hours of twilight. The orange-colored rocket thrust a tiny white spacecraft toward none other than Earth's shining friend, the Moon, lighting up the night sky with a synthetic sunset in a flash of fire and smoke. After months of anticipation, the historic Artemis 1 launched on the 16th of November 2022. This historic occasion marked the beginning of a mission that would fly an unmanned spacecraft around the Moon. This will allow NASA to bring astronauts back to the lunar surface for the first time in 50 years. After more than 9 hours of travel, the Orion spacecraft revealed its breathtaking first images of Earth while traveling to the Moon, some 57,000 kilometers distant. Since the last Apollo mission in 1972, a spacecraft intended to take people to the Moon has not taken a photo of Earth. To lift itself off the launch pad in Florida and into the air, it released up to 9 million pounds of force. It then streaked brilliantly through the night sky. The Orion spacecraft, a gumdrop-shaped capsule that detached from the rocket after entering space, was perched atop the rocket. Orion is built to transport people, but on this test flight, it is carrying inanimate objects, including mannequins that are gathering crucial information for future life crews. Millions of pounds of fuel were used by the Space Launch System rocket before fragments of the rocket started to fall apart, leaving Orion with only one powerful engine to propel it through orbit. The spacecraft then launched on the proper course toward the Moon, thanks to 2 strong fires from its engine. Then, roughly 2 hours after takeoff, the rocket engine was likewise removed, letting Orion continue its trip in free flight. Orion underwent its outbound trajectory adjustment burn, a mission milestone that guarantees the spacecraft stays on course, about 8 hours after launch. The burn prepares Orion for its lunar flyby and closest approach to the Moon on November 21st, followed by November 25th, 2022 by entry into a far-off retrograde orbit around the Moon. Next week, Orion will do a near flyby of the Moon that will bring it to within 60 miles of its surface. 16 cameras were installed, both inside and outside the spaceship, to capture the journey around the Moon from various angles. One of the Artemis mannequins traveling in the capsule, Commander Munikin Campos, was dressed in survival gear. According to NASA, Orion is anticipated to go further than any spacecraft created for human flight, clocking up at about 1.3 million kilometers. Orion will make its way back after circling the Moon, finishing its trek in around 25.5 days. On the 11th of December 2022, recovery workers will be ready to pull the capsule to safety when it splashes down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego. NASA engineers will closely monitor the spacecraft's functioning during the journey. The group will assess Orion's functionality and be prepared to assist its first crewed voyage to lunar orbit, which is now planned for 2024. With 15% greater horsepower than the Saturn V rocket that propelled NASA's moon landing in the 20th century, this mission also serves as the Space Launch System's rocket first launch, making it the most powerful rocket to ever reach Earth's orbit. And while NASA works toward its objective of creating a permanent base on the Moon, this mission is just the first in what is anticipated to be a lengthy sequence of ever more challenging Artemis missions. The Artemis 2 will travel along the same route as the Artemis 1, except it will carry astronauts. A woman and a man are anticipated to touch down on the lunar surface for the first time on the Artemis 3, which is scheduled for later. Before the launch on the morning of November 16, 2022, the mission crew had several obstacles, including technical difficulties with the big moon rocket and 2 hurricanes that passed the launch site. However, on the 15th of November 2022, the tanks were full despite leak troubles that interrupted fueling hours before the launch. NASA had to abandon earlier takeoff attempts because of the Space Launch System rocket's super chill liquid hydrogen fueling, which proved to be one of the key problems. In order to solve that issue, NASA sent out what it refers to as a Red Crew, a team of workers who have been properly trained to perform repairs while the rocket is filled with fuel. To halt the gasoline leaks, various nuts and bolts were tightened. Charlie Blackwell Thompson, NASA's first female launch director, will oversee the first mission's countdown and launch, which is only fitting. However, Artemis 1 is much more than just a feminist movement. It will accomplish a number of significant firsts throughout its 37-day voyage in an extended retrograde orbit around the Moon, traveling in the opposite direction from the Moon orbiting the Earth. Jim Free, Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems Development at NASA, claims that we're going to carry the first human vehicle further than any human vehicle has gone before, and the Orion spacecraft will go 40,000 kilometers beyond the Moon. Orion, NASA's newest crewed exploration spacecraft, will beat the previous record established by the crew of the Apollo 13 back in 1970, when it reaches this distance from the planet, which is around 280,000 kilometers. A human-sized mannequin with sensors will serve as Orion's spacecraft crew for Artemis 1, which is a test mission in order to gauge the pressures, strains, and probable radiation that the crew will experience for the Artemis 2 and beyond. That's not all though. Artemis 1 will launch on a Space Launch System rocket, which, despite being smaller than the Saturn V, has the tallest rocket stage in the world at 64.6 meters, after several delays brought on by technical difficulties and hydrogen fuel leaks. Additionally, Artemis will have a different focus. Apollo was largely involved in the Cold War arms competition between the United States and the Soviet Union in the 1960s. The Canadian Space Agency, CSA, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA, and the European Space Agency are all participants in the multinational Project Artemis, which is coordinated by NASA. NASA's Associate Administrator for Science, Thomas Zerbeshan, asserts this is not about flags and footprints, it's about creating a long-lasting presence on the moon and laying the groundwork for future expeditions to Mars. Even the voice assistants that compete with Alexa and Siri will be put to the test by Artemis. The Callisto system, created by Lockheed Martin in collaboration with Cisco and Amazon, will show if voice-activated orders and feedback are valuable for upcoming operations. Just be careful not to bring up HAL, the notorious computer from Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 A Space Odyssey. It's obvious that Artemis is much more than a reprise of Apollo. In order to support more lunar explorations and a potential base, NASA will also build the Gateway, a tiny space station circling the moon in deep space. This station will be built in collaboration with JAXA, CSA, ESA, and private partnerships. Even more ambitiously, NASA plans to set up LunaNet, the first lunar communications network, which will provide navigational services as well as internet-like services on the moon. The first moonwalk was witnessed by over 650 million people. Who knows how many people will see the first woman or non-white astronaut take the next one tiny step. With Artemis 3, thanks to social media and smartphones, NASA will receive the information it needs from Artemis 1 to make sure people go to the moon in the Orion spacecraft safely. The agency will also get the chance to test whether the spacecraft's terminal shield will effectively cover the astronauts inside when it re-enters our atmosphere and crashes into the Pacific Ocean. If all goes according to plan, NASA will be able to begin organizing Artemis 2, which would be Orion's first crewed mission, and send people on a lunar flyby. What are your thoughts on Artemis 1? If you're interested in knowing about the solar system, take a look at our video about the Kuiper Belt which is shown here. If you have any topics that you want us to cover, let us know in the comment section below. We hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did like the video, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press that bell icon. And we'll see you next time. Take care.